I went on a fishing trip with my dad. We later realized we weren't alone. To start off this story, I will not be giving the location of my encounter. I'm a male and don't believe in cryptids, ghosts, etc. I look at everything scientifically. But a few months ago, I encountered someone. No, rather something that has left me ominous and on the edge. I tried to forget about it, but after over half a year, it still hasn't left my mind. I went camping in the woods with my dad. It had to be at least an hour drive on a dirt path into the woods, and another 10-minute walk before we found a nice spot to set up camp near a lake. When we arrived at the spot, it was already 6 p.m. The sun was beginning to set, so my first move was to set up all the fishing gear. Meanwhile, my dad was setting up our tent and making a fire pit. By the time it was all set up, it was already 6:30 p.m. We began fishing, and hell, even caught a couple big fish we planned on eating. It got dark after a while. It got too dark to see our bobbers properly, so we stopped fishing for the night. We lit up the fire and began cooking the fish. My dad started to tell stories of his time in the military, which I always found fascinating as a kid. He was very into telling his story and completely oblivious of his surroundings. I was too deep into listening to his story to notice anything either, but suddenly I felt a chill rush through my body. I noticed the entire woods wasn't emitting any sound, no birds, no water, no wind, nothing. My dad suddenly stopped mid-sentence with the most terrifying look I have ever seen on a man's face. He quietly commanded me to get his shotgun, which he always took on trips in the woods to fend off from any aggressive wildlife, which I did. His exact words were,
"Don't think of it. Don't speak of it. It'll only get attracted."
The air felt dense and heavy. I have asthma, which did not make this any better, and I began coughing. My dad shrieked out aloud,
"Shh!"
as commanding me to keep quiet. Right after he did that, we heard the snap of a branch. Very quietly, but still noticeable about 10 meters away. My head locked in that direction, and there was but silence and no movement for 5 minutes. It was the deepest silence I've ever heard. The air began getting heavier and heavier. I turned my head to view my dad. He is a 6'5" giant of a man, nearly pissing his pants of fear. Sweat dripping off his face, gripping his Remington very tightly. I heard another noise, like the sound of dead leaves crackling from the opposite side where noise first originated, but this time closer and louder. My eyes locked onto something. 2 white eyes reflecting the light the campfire gave. My dad looked at me and saw my scared eyes locked onto something behind him. He widened his eyes and kept looking at me until he got my attention. He very cautiously and slowly moved his hand to the flashlight mounted on the barrel of his gun. In the blink of an eye, he turned around and turned the flashlight on, aiming at whatever we saw. The light hit it, and I saw the most unearthly, unhumane-looking thing I had ever laid my eyes upon. I only viewed it for a little bit, but I can describe it as a pale human. But it didn't feel right. Human eyes don't reflect light. There was little to no body hair on it. It looked malnutritioned. And when I say that, I mean very malnutritioned. Almost its entire skeletal build was revealed. It looked like, with any movement, the bones could pierce the skin. It was laying low to the ground, but as soon as I saw it, I could tell this thing was massive. Bigger than my dad, definitely. At least 7 feet tall. Its arms were the worst I viewed. They were very out of proportion. Almost the entire length of its body, at the ends of the arms, was the most terrifying thing I got to see. Its hands, or rather claws, they were very thin and long and stained with crimson like spots I could only assume was dried up blood. I'm glad I didn't have to view its face. When the light hit it, it let out the most blood-curdling and most unearthly screech I had ever heard. My dad emptied about 3 shots in rapid succession into it. He screamed,
"To the car! Now!"
I ran as fast as I possibly could. Whilst running, I heard a voice. A voice, but it didn't sound right. The tone wasn't human-like. The voice said,
"Come back! Tell me, please!"
My dad yelled at me to not think about it, and to not look back. When we finally reached the car, I felt the biggest relief I have ever felt. We immediately went in the car and sped away, well above the speed you should drive over a dirt road. I swear I could feel it watching me, following my movement. When we got out of the woods and onto the road lit up by streetlights, we calmed down a bit. I asked my dad, what was that? He repeated his words he said at the camp. Don't think of it. Don't speak of it. It will only get attracted. Sometimes I can still hear the same voice when near the edge of the woods. Whatever it is, it wants me. Ever since, I have never entered any woods or forest when in the evening or night. I do not wish to ever go back, but I need answers. What the hell did I see? What was that thing?